Hi, it's Penny here, and this is another video continuing the series where I try the first chapter of all the book series that I'm interested in reading and come up with some kind of priority reading order. In this particular video, we're going to be focusing on books which I'm kind of just referring to as like my completionist books. They're books where, for some reason, I feel like this series is a completion or a continuation of some other books or book series that I've read, and so I want to read them for that reason, even though I'm not sure that I have more reason to really justify picking up some of these. So it will be interesting to see how the priority of these comes out against book series I tried in previous videos where I was more hyped about them for certain reasons. Anyway, as usual, I did manage to get about half, no more than half of them actually, from the library. So we'll try these ones first, then I'll get into the ones I only have digitally. I will also, for all of these, be trying the audiobook because I always need more audiobooks to read. So the first book on the pile is Champion of Fate by Kendare Blake. I want to read this because I read the Three Dark Crowns. Is that what the series is called? I'm not sure, but Kendare Blake's other like witchy fantasy series, I read that. It wasn't perfect, but there were some things I really liked about it. And this is Kendare Blake's new series. This is a YA series. It's called Heromaker. There's 2 books out so far. I'm not sure how long the series is going to be. And I also know nothing about this. It says there's a mythical order of female warriors. While heroes are the ones immortalized in legends, it's the Aristine who guide their paths to victory. They are the hero makers. So I'll try the first chapter of this and then let you know what I think. Okay, so I read the first chapter of Champions of Fate. And firstly, the audiobook doesn't seem to be available in New Zealand. I did listen to the sample on the main Amazon Audible website, the American version, but part of me thinks that's pointless because I won't be able to get my hands on the whole audiobook. And also, I couldn't speed it up. I had to listen to it on 1x speed, and 1x speed is so slow and horrible, so it wasn't really a good test of it anyway. So I don't think I'll bother with that again if I can't get it locally. Also, the first chapter I don't think was necessarily very representative of the book. We really just got this very young girl. Her mother has taken her to talk to the wise woman of their group. It seems like they're kind of some kind of maybe refugee group that's gone to another location. But anyway, this wise woman refuses to acknowledge this young girl, basically saying, no, you can tell she's not one of us, so why would I even bother talking to her? And then after that, their group is attacked, and it seems like everyone else is dead now. And this young girl, I guess, is going to somehow end up being part of this mythical order of female warriors in some way. But we didn't get to that in the first chapter. I don't know what the lighting is doing here. This is in the bright sun, this is not. Anyway, as far as this book goes, I think I'm feeling just kind of maybe about it. So in my big priority list, basically at this point I have a list of prioritized lists. So these are my different lists I have. I'm going to put this in the maybe because I'm not even sure if I actually want to read this or not. It didn't do enough in the beginning to really sell me on the story. I do think though, in terms of that maybe list, I will put it right at the top because I still thought this was quite well written, better written than anything else on the list. Just not, I don't know, it didn't do anything to make me want to read this, and because I've heard nothing about this from anyone else, I don't know. It's just a maybe for me. So then the next book on my pile of books here to try is Wayward Pines by Blake. No, the series is called Wayward Pines. This book is just called Pines. It's by Blake Crouch. I really liked Dark Matter and Recursion by Blake Crouch. I absolutely hated Upgrade by him. So I've heard a lot of good things about this. I'm hoping kind of going back into his backlist might work better for me than going forward into his new works. Maybe. I also don't really know anything about this. It's saying some kind of Secret Service agent is arriving in town in search of 2 missing federal agents, and soon is facing more than he bargained for. So let's try it. So the first chapter of Pines, we're basically following this guy who wakes up in the middle of these pines near this small town, and he has no memory of where he is, and he's kind of just trying to figure out where to go, where to get help, how to remember where he is. I liked that first chapter. I felt very invested in working out what was going on. However, I will say I had a quick glance at chapter 2, and it looks like in chapter 2 he remembers who he is again. So there's definitely a mystery around, well, I don't know. From the start of chapter 2, maybe I shouldn't have glanced at chapter 2, but the start of chapter 2 kind of makes it seem like the whole mystery set up in chapter 1 is already solved. But I guess there'll be more. I don't really know. I mean, I know there's still going to be this mystery that he's trying to find these missing people. But like, was all the mysteries that were set up in chapter 1 even relevant? I just feel like if it is, then it could be really cool. If it's not, I'm going to feel very betrayed. I will note though, actually, the front of the library books from my library have these little sheets, and the idea is that old people use it. They like write their initials or whatever, and then they know that they've read this book. There's quite a lot of little signatures on this, little initials. Like quite a lot compared to most other books I get out from the library. So this must be popular with the old people, which isn't what I would have expected. Oh, I will also say I tried the audiobook sample. I thought it was quite good. I would probably read this by audiobook. So in terms of priority, for this video, I did find this a lot more interesting than Champions of Fate. So that'll be the order for this video. Then in terms of the bigger priority, I'm going to put it on my intrigued list because I'm intrigued. I'm worried about it not delivering, but I am intrigued about what's being set up. And I did like the way it was being written. However, I think just because I have those concerns, I'm going to put it at the bottom of intrigued. Like, I don't think the writing style and the tone is quite as good as Theft of Swords and the Ryria Chronicles, which, to be honest, I'm currently reading the last book of, but I didn't get the same vibes from it as that, so we'll keep that one above Pines. So then, the next series I will be trying starts with The Smoke Thieves by Sally Green. I really liked, can you see it down here? The Half Bad trilogy by Sally Green, and so I did want to try her next trilogy. I think it's a trilogy, but there is no mention of whether it's a trilogy, but I looked it up. It is called The Smoke Thieves trilogy, and the synopsis basically talks about like 5 young people's lives being changed by a stolen bottle of demon smoke. And I think it was the demon element that especially made me interested in this. It's too shiny for me to show you. I'm a little bit concerned about the number of main characters, because definitely when it comes to trying the first chapter, if it's a multiple perspective story and you only get one chapter's perspective, then does the first chapter really give you a good feel for it or not? I don't know. I guess we'll try it. Okay, so I quite liked the first chapter of The Smoke Thieves. It's still too shiny. Basically, we're following this young girl who was sold by her family to this guy who's like a demon hunter, and he wanted her to act as bait because she was really fast at running. And so basically her and this guy, who she now thinks of as her family, they just go around and hunt demons, but they don't hunt as many as some other demon hunters by the sounds of it. And also, so like the valuable thing seems to be the smoke. So when the demons die, the smoke comes out of their body. It seems like it's all colorful. The demons themselves are not described in a lot of detail, but it says they're like purple and red and orange, and that seems to be the colors the smoke are as well. Although I don't think the girl often gets to see it because she like jumps in this pit. I don't know. I'm not clear on the specifics of demon hunting, but I enjoyed the first chapter. I also liked the audiobook, but what I will say is that it's clear from the beginning, it gives you like the cast, and I think that every character is going to have a different audiobook narrator. So I liked the first audiobook narrator. Will I like the other ones? Who knows, because they're not in the sample. But as well, in the physical book, you can see for each chapter they kind of have like a little symbol that's relative to their character. So there are 5 characters. I found all their different names and pictures without looking too closely about what's actually going on. And I do worry a little bit that with 5 main characters, that each one is not really going to get that much page time per book. But I thought it was well written. Like, I felt engaged in the story. It felt real. And I'm very interested about these demons and what's going on with them. It's illegal, I should say, to trade in smoke from demons. It says at the beginning, it is illegal to buy, trade in, procure, obtain, by any means, inhale, swallow, or use in any fashion the smoke from demons. What is it used for? I still don't know, but I'm excited to find out when I get to this. So in terms of priority for this video, I'm going to put it at the top. I think I'm more interested in it than I was in Pines. Pines was intriguing, but this seems like it has the potential to be like an interesting fantasy world. And I think maybe part of why I believe that is because I've already read by Sally Green and I have confidence in her ability. So that's the priority for this video. In terms of the bigger priority, I'm going to put it into the intrigue list, same as Pines, but higher than Pines, obviously. I'm going to put it underneath Mooncold and above Malice. I am a little bit doubtful because at this point, I've read Malice, or I've tried to read Malice. I actually DNF'd it. I'm trying to keep in mind my initial impression of the first chapter of Malice, but I still think I liked the writing of the Smoke Thieves better. Maybe it's just because it's YA, but it was a lot easier to read. And the world seemed a lot more unique. And the character, at least the first character, felt like one I would relate and care about a lot more than any of the characters I was first introduced to in Malice. But I'm not putting it above the Mercy Thompson series because that just seemed like a really solid urban fantasy with maybe like a sense of humor that I appreciated a bit more. So that's where we're going to put that one. The next book that I'm going to try for this video, I just tried to look up what the series was called. So this is Chosen Ones by Veronica Roth, who is the author of the Divergent series. I'm a little bit concerned because this was released 2020, and since then there doesn't seem to have been any books released in the series, even though it is listed as a series online. But it does now seem like Veronica Roth is focusing on her Cursebearer series because there's a second book of that coming out this year and still nothing from this one. So if I end up loving this, that could be bad. My understanding is that this is an adult series where a bunch of teenagers, yes, teenagers, were the chosen ones and they defeated this like big bad evil guy, and as a result are now suffering from a lot of trauma, and then there's a new evil they need to face, and like they really don't want to because they're so traumatized from the first kind of saving of the world that they did. So I've heard a lot of good things about this. Let's try the first chapter. Okay, so before I got to the first chapter of The Chosen Ones, there was like a article. So there's a little, I think it's like a academic like paper, an excerpt from that, and then there's an article that's maybe like what a Rolling Stone article would be like if they were interviewing a chosen one, except it's a chosen one where she's not very likable. It's kind of like the most unlikable of this group of 5 chosen ones, but she's also dating the most likable one, the leader of the group. But it also seems like the interview ends when they ask her about the Dark One and her relationship to the Dark One, and she's like, that's the one topic that I said was off limits, so interview over. And she wasn't very nice through the whole interview, but also the interviewer was kind of a creepy dickhead, so I think when you read it you're more on her side. And then the first chapter is her perspective. I think, or I feel like, most of the book is going to be from her perspective. I thought it might be like from the perspective of all the different chosen ones, but I think it might be her, because also the audiobook, it says that the narrators are Veronica Roth herself and also Dakota Fanning, and then other just various cast members. And so I assume that Dakota Fanning is going to be doing the main characters' parts. What I'm annoyed about is that the audiobook sample didn't get up to that. All the audiobook sample did was that little article, Rolling Stone type article. So I didn't get to hear, what is Dakota Fanning's audiobook narration like? Is it good? I don't know. But I think I'd be interested in trying the audiobook. And I am actually very interested in reading this. So then the first chapter is basically just a little bit, it's quite a short first chapter, a little bit of Sloane, our main character, and she's suffering from PTSD as a result of this whole saving the world thing that they did. And it's also clear that she is still keeping some secrets about what actually happened during that whole situation. And I really liked the little scene we got with her. She felt very real and relatable, and I was pulled into her story straight away. So I am actually very excited about this one. Like more than I would have expected. So in terms of this video's priority, once again, I'm just putting this book on the top. So this order is basically just the opposite of which I read them, I think. And then in terms of the bigger priority, I am actually going to put it in the keen list. So I am going to put this quite near the top of the keen list. I'm actually going to put it just under the first binding. Now, if you watch my videos, you know I gave the first binding 1 star. However, based on the first chapter, I think that first chapter of the first binding was so great. So I wouldn't put it higher than that, but I am going to put it higher than Dreamer's Pool. Because I think in both of those, the characters feel very relatable, but the world of the Chosen Ones felt a lot more real as well as the characters. And I think it's just a much more interesting setup. Also, I'm still a little bit worried about Dreamer's Pool being like too romantic-y for me, whereas this, I don't think it will be. So that's where that one goes. Then the next book I have is Perseus Spur. It's another shiny one. This is the first book in the Rampart Worlds trilogy. I've actually owned this particular book for a long time now, like maybe 15 years. And I think I even started this 15 years ago, but then I didn't think I was going to be able to get my hands on the other books in the trilogy. I now own the whole trilogy. And actually, I should have read the first chapter of this when I did a long time ago, a triad chapter of all the series on my shelves. I didn't do it because in my head I was thinking of this with all my other like older fantasy books where I want to do a reread. But this doesn't really belong there because I've never read this book fully. I only ever started it. And I've kind of forgotten a lot about it. I think it's a mix between a fantasy and a sci-fi because one of our characters is on some planet where they do a lot of space travel. And then for whatever reason, they're going to go to this other planet where there's more of a magic fantasy world. And then I think another character was like Queen of the Goblins or something. Honestly, I don't really know, but we'll try the first chapter. Okay, so I read the first chapter of Perseus Spur, and I don't think this is the book exactly that I remembered. Like, I think maybe I combined this book with another book in my head because there was none of that, like, I was talking about some kind of goblin queen and another, like, fantasy planet. I don't think that's going to be in this. I think this is like a pure sci-fi. Our main character is, I think, the son of an important family in these, like a world where the corporations are gaining a lot of power in terms of running the universe because there's a lot of like corporate-owned planets. And then our main character has been done for some kind of crime that it seems like he's actually innocent of, but still it's kind of ruined his life and he's gone to live in this middle of nowhere planet and just kind of make a living doing like underwater diving tours for the tourists. And then these rich executives from a particular corporate have come, and I think that's going to lead to things going quite wrong for him. There was a line I really loved. Oh, on the first page it says, "I'm still convinced that the 100 concerns would never have come tumbling down, changing the course of human civilization in our galaxy and defeating the Hulk invasion if the sea monster hadn't eaten my house." So while he's out on this tour, this toad, giant sea toad, eats his house, and the whole trip is kind of a disaster from the first chapter. So I assume he's going to get pulled back into corporate life in some way. But I quite like the tone of it and the general concept. Like, I always like sci-fis that look at this idea of what if the corporations started gaining a lot more power in the world, especially like governmental type power, because that does seem to be a fairly big or decent risk in our world at the moment. But yeah, I did have a flick through and I couldn't see any fantasy stuff. So now I'm thinking, what book series was that I was thinking about? It's obviously something I picked up around the same time as I picked this up. What was it? It's going to be on my list of books where I have a vague memory of it and I can never work out what it is. Terrible. Anyway, this, in terms of priority for this video, I think I'm definitely going to put it under these top two because I think these are much more interesting. I'm not sure. I think I will put it under Pines just because the writing in Pines was a lot more accessible and really drew me into the story, and also because I'm going to read this via audiobook and the books are pretty short, I know it will be a pretty quick read. Perseus Spur, it's an older fantasy, so there is no audiobooks that exist, but I do think the world in this was more interesting than the world in Champion of Fate. So we'll put it here in the priority list. And then in terms of the bigger priority, I think I'm just going to put it on my want to read list. Because while I had fun with it, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily like intrigued about the plot. The first chapter didn't set up enough plot or mystery to really intrigue me. But I still definitely want to read it, especially because it's been on my shelves for like 15 years, maybe even 20 years, who knows. And then on my want to read list, I think I'm going to put it above Immortal Longings because the writing was better. The tone was a lot better than Immortal Longings. And the world felt a lot more real. But I'm not going to put it above Harpy's Flight because that's Robin Hobb, Megan Lindholm. And that, even though it had a bit of a slow start, definitely still felt like it was going to be a very emotional story. And it pulled me in that way. So I'm going to put Perseus Spur in that gap. However, then I was looking at this and I think this list needs a little shuffle. So what we're going to do is I'm going to move Leviathan Wakes and Ithaca that are at the bottom there. I actually quite want to read those two, so we're going to bump them up in the priority above Perseus Spur. I think that makes this list a little bit more right in terms of how I'm feeling at the moment. I've decided every time we put a book on the list, we'll just shuffle it if we decide it's wrong. It's my project, it's my rules. Okay, then we're on to the 3 series where I only have access to them digitally. We're going to start with a series by Mark Lawrence. Actually, I've got 2 by Mark Lawrence, but first we will try The Girl in the Stars, which is the first book of the Book of the Ice series. I think, I could be wrong, but I think this series is connected to the Book of the Ancestors series. So that's why I wanted to try it, even though I don't actually know much about it other than that it's set on like a really cold, icy world. So we'll try the first chapter of that and see what we think. So Girl in the Stars actually in some ways started out kind of similar to Champion of Fate, where we have this baby being taken to an oracle, but the first oracle that this baby's taken to dies kind of just as they're looking at the baby, so that seems like a bad sign. Then they take her to another oracle who says, what did she say? Wait, the second oracle says greatness and torment, a pause, and fire. So then that was the prologue, and then it kind of skips forward in time for the first chapter to this girl who's like 16-ish, I think. Was she 13? No, she's 16. And her and her family are traveling through this kind of ice country that they live in. Everything's ice and cold. And then every 3 or so years, they go to this thing where the children are examined by the regulator, and if the regulator determines that they're broken, they get thrown into a pit. So the idea is that to live in this really cold place, you have to be strong, and if you're weak, you're going to like pull everyone down, so it's just unacceptable. And our main character is expecting that the regulator is going to find her broken, because even the last time she saw the regulator, she felt like she was beginning to be broken. Like, it seems like she just doesn't feel like she's quite physically as capable as other people, although she does have access to this magical river, is what she describes it as. It's actually the path which is described in the original Book of the Ancestors series, so there's definitely going to be some kind of link there. And so for most of the first chapter, I was kind of just reading through it. I thought it was fine, but it was one of those chapters where the end of the chapter is an oh shit moment where it kind of just doesn't go in the direction you've been thinking it was going to go. So the very end of the chapter, until then I was like, this is fine. And then I was like, okay, I like this. I will still say, I feel like it might be similar to my experience with a lot of Mark Lawrence stuff, where I really like the concepts and like the themes, but I don't necessarily like some of the execution. Oh, also the audiobook was good. I probably would read this by audiobook because I've read a lot of Mark Lawrence's stuff by audiobook. And I think it's the same audiobook narrator as the Book of the Ancestors. I'm a little bit conflicted about whether I should read it via audiobook or not, but I think I'm short of audiobooks at the moment, so probably I would. But I sometimes wonder if my problem with Mark Lawrence's execution is that it doesn't translate well to audio and that it's hard to pick up on everything that's happening. But I do think maybe I started the Book of the Ancestors physically and then swapped to the audiobook when I was struggling with it, so maybe that's not right. Anyway, from the first chapter, it seems like there's a lot that our main character doesn't know about the world and that she's going to discover it based on what happened. So I'm definitely interested. So in terms of this video, I think I'm going to put the priority above the Smoke Thieves and under Chosen Ones. I definitely didn't love it as much as Chosen Ones in terms of both writing style and concept, but I think the world felt even more real than the Smoke Thieves, and like the promise of the themes and the concepts seem more interesting than the Smoke Thieves. So I'll probably stick it in that gap. And then in terms of the bigger priority, I think I want to put it in the intrigued list. However, if I do that, the intrigued list will be 13 books and 12 is the limit. So at this point, we have to break it into 2 more lists. So I think what I'm going to do is split intrigued into interested and intrigued. It's getting hard to come up with names for these priority lists, to be honest. But anyway, then I think I am going to still put this in the intrigued part of the list, so the upper part of what was the intrigued list. And I actually think I'm going to put it right at the top, mainly for what happened right at the end of that first chapter. But I did also like the thing with the oracles, and I think it could be really cool. So of all the ones in here, I think I'm the most intrigued about it. The Shadow of What Was Lost mainly made its way in here because of what I'd heard the book was going to be about rather than what I got from the first chapter. So I'll put it at the top of the list for now. Then the next one we're going to try is also by Mark Lawrence, and that is Prince of Thorns. So the series is called Broken Empire. I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy, and I've heard it's a lot more like grimdark than some of his later series. And I haven't actually heard anything about what the story is actually about. So I'll try the first chapter and see if that helps me figure it out. So the most impressive thing about the first chapter of Prince of Thorns is how much it managed to make me hate the main character in such few pages. Like, it was very short. We're just introduced to this boy. At the very end, he says that he's only 13 and he's with this kind of band of outlaws that are taking over this town, killing people, raping people, doing terrible things. And this young boy is like taking so much pleasure in all the awfulness that's happening. And the audiobook narrator actually did a really good job of like having that spoilt little shit taking pleasure in the misfortunes of other, like that voice. He did it so well. So I hate the main character, and I can definitely see why I've heard some negative things about this series, because no doubt our main character is going to be doing like a lot of really terrible things, and like he doesn't have good intentions. There's no way he has good reasons to do anything that he's doing. You can't justify it in any way. Like, I feel like when I think about other grimdark stories that I've read, you can justify the things they're doing. I'm especially thinking of like the First Law World, where all the characters are morally grey, doing terrible things, but you still kind of like them. Whereas this guy, he's doing terrible things and you hate him. And I don't know whether it's going to try and justify the things he's doing or at least explain it. And I believe he's going to have some kind of arc that leads him to become a better person, maybe? So I kind of don't know with this one. I think either I could hate it, depending on the direction it goes, like hate it as much as I hate the main character. And I think I have a fair amount of tolerance for reading about awful things happening, as long as it eventually does something with it. So if it does something with it that's interesting, I think I could end up loving it, maybe. So in terms of priority, I think actually I'm going to put it on the floor. Do you know, the books that fell off were the books that I wanted to put above this book in the priority. So was that like the ghost of our main character perpetrating violence? Let's say it's that and not my clumsiness. So I think I'm going to put it under The Girl in the Stars. So in this gap, under The Girl in the Stars though, because The Girl in the Stars was even more intriguing. But I think I am... Oh, actually, no, that's right. It's in this gap, isn't it? Not this one. Blah. Anyway, I'm going to put it in here. I do think that the darkness actually appeals to me more than the little bit of darkness we got in the Smoke Thieves. Like, I almost am like, if we're going to go dark, let's just go there. So, in terms of the bigger priority, that means I am going to put it in the intrigued list, because I am intrigued. I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but I am intrigued. And I think I'm going to put it just above the Smoke Thieves and not any higher, because I think, as I said, maybe even earlier in this video, I just feel like the Mercy Thompson series is going to be solidly enjoyable and maybe get into some of those themes about morality without needing to go quite so dark. Maybe. Anyway, that's where I'm going to put it. So then I just have one more series that I want to try for this video, and the first book is Death's Daughter. So this is by Amber Benson, who was Tara in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer books. And honestly, I've always just wanted to read this because it's Tara from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Also, Amber Benson does do a bit of audiobook narration. I think she's done some ones by Sean and Maguire. And I don't know much more about this other than that I assume the main character, whose name must be Calliope? Is that how you say that? Calliope Reaper Jones. That's the name of the series, and there's 3 books. And I've just read the synopsis. It's kind of talking about death as the family business that she's expected to go into, even though she didn't really want to, but now she also has to prove her place. Wow, that sun is super bright now. Anyway, I'm going to read the first chapter of that and then we'll check back in. Okay, so scratch that because I couldn't get my hand on Death's Daughter anywhere. I can't get the audiobook. There doesn't seem to be an audiobook, and there doesn't seem to be an ebook either. So then I looked for something else by Amber Benson that I could try, and I found one called The Witches of Echo Park, which is about, supposedly, this young girl, her auntie dies, and she, when she comes back, is kind of forced to take over her auntie's place in the coven, even though it seems like somebody's killing off all the witches, so like, that's a dangerous thing to do. But this one, still, even though it was published, I think, in 2015, there's only an audiobook, no ebook. I think also like a paperback you can order, but I'm not going to do that. And the audiobook sample was really short, and I think we were just getting a bit of the perspective of her auntie before she dies. So like, she seemed like a nice old witchy lady, but to be honest, the audiobook is also narrated by Amber Benson, and the last time I listened to something by Amber Benson was, I'm pretty sure, the Alchemical Journeys series by Sean and Maguire. Now, I did love Middle Game, but the rest of the books in that series, I hated them. And so listening to Amber Benson's voice again was just like throwing me back into that Alchemical Journeys mindset, and I wasn't having fun. And if I can only get this via audiobook, really, because I'm not going to buy it. Like, honestly, it's not to my taste. So if I was going to put it in priority for the books in this video, it would be right down the bottom. And then in the bigger priority, I would actually put it in the not for me list. And to be honest, I'd probably put it right at the bottom because I wasn't even interested in reading this. And I'm a bit too lazy to compare it to some of the other ones. But the other ones, I still feel like there was something that interested me. Whereas this one, nah, I can tell it's just not for me. Anyway, that means that's all the books that I'm going to be reading for this video. I do think, so this is pretty much all the books I read except for a couple of Mark Lawrence ones in here and that Amber Benson one at the bottom, I think. And while I am quite excited about reading chosen ones, I think this list of books did end up lower in the overall priorities compared to some of the other videos I've done in this series. And that probably is because most of these I didn't necessarily have as good a reason for being interested in them. So like a couple of them did intrigue me, but there's none that I'm like totally hyped about reading. And there were a few kind of at the bottom that I feel pretty ambivalent towards. But I do think I might pick up chosen ones soon because I am excited about this. I did find some more stuff online actually saying that it isn't a series. So now it all seems very conflicting. Maybe it's not even a series, but I might try the audiobook for this soon. And the rest of these will probably take me a while to get to because I have a lot of other series that I'm more excited about. Anyway, do let me know if you've read any of these books and whether you have thoughts about them because I'd love to chat with you about them down in the comments. And do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well and I will see you next time.